this whole thing about collective presencing as a practice, it started a long time ago. And sometimes when we were in circle practice and when we were in deep, deep dialogue, we could sense that some kind of a different energy became palpable. Like we didn't know what was going on or how to name it, and we called it the magic in the middle. And that brought us into a gathering where we actually started to look into, like, what is this? What is that shift in energy, that shift in awareness when you're really deep into dialogue with the group? And George Bohr was part of that initial gathering in Denmark. A gathering with lots of trial and errors, but eventually we got there when we dropped all facilitation. And another entry into all this was when Otto Scharmer, who probably most of you know from Theory U and ULab and related workshops, he was publishing a 25-page document that was before his actual book came out. And it held, I think, 21 principles for the work he was describing. And I was so enthused about these principles, and I wanted to apply it to what I had been seen and experiencing in many groups and women's groups and circle groups. But then after some time, I realized I could not try to force my experience in what he was then describing. So that led me to develop my own model, which is now collective presencing, and my own practice, or our own practice. And I think what stood out for me from the beginning as maybe specific features of collective presencing is we really start with an embodied presence. And I guess, as some of you have named, that deeper me that you were talking about, and the pain we encounter in the world right now, and not being shut down, but how can we stay open, embodied in the presence with whatever is arising? It can be a lot of pain, but it can be joy, and it can be the courage, and it can be the excitement, and all of that. And so that's why I pay a lot of attention in the book to how can you be present to all this, what is happening in yourself, not just the thoughts, not just the very raw emotions, but also the subtle. And that's the second feature, is I think we need to discover, amplify, use more our subtle sensing. We do have all this capacity to notice way more than our mainstream identity would do. And especially in the practice of collective presencing is to bring that in and slow down the conversation enough so that the subtle sensing, not just in me, but that we can also start using subtle sensing on that level of a group or a team, or the level of we. this we that we are here now. And that brings me to the third thing, which is that collective purpose. Initially, Thierry Yu described going to the bottom of the U, as Shamra uses it, as a very individual, let's say, exercise of being outdoors at night and go deep, deep, deep. And what I saw, or what we saw in the practice of collective presencing is how can we do that together, to be in that space where we actually hold each other in pain or in uniqueness and all that, and actually can access through that subtle sensing of some deeper, you could say, truth or insight or deep understanding in yourself. Because I'm really convinced with what all that's going on in the world, we really need to hold it together. And that is actually, these three things are my main elements, you could say. In the book, I describe a process that goes from I to we and deeper we and so on. But as one of you said, there is no me without a we and vice versa. It's indeed that Möbius ring, or that symbol of ongoing life that keeps on going from one pole to the other. And in my book, I describe first a circle of presence and later on the circle of creation. And the circle of presence is actually where you learn that deeper me, where you learn more of what is all your subtle sensing, where you learn to hold together, where we each really see each other, where there is indeed a safe enough space. And we learn to discern when are we projecting on each other and when are the shadow elements coming in. So it's the whole that group dynamic stuff that you can learn about, and really have to understand that groups that engage in this practice, they go through these phases that have been described. Because in the beginning you think, oh, it's all lovely, great people, and this is such a great group. Certain point, especially when you start to work together on a certain topic, on a certain issue, somehow all these projections come in and you start like, I don't know, I don't like what he is saying, or I don't know why she did that. All this blurry stuff starts getting into in the way, and still you have to move through that, still in circle practice, so that you come to what is called sometimes as a true community, where you can suspend any judgment and actually access a deeper layer. In the book, I also describe in between these two phases that whole paradigm shift. And what do I mean with that? I think somebody of you named it like as if we go beyond the paradoxes. It's not either or, this individual or collective. It's not the anxiety and the fear only. It's not either or. We start to understand that in this group or in this team that we are doing this practice, that actually we are here and now enacting the shift. So if we are able to embrace both poles of all kinds of paradoxes, that is actually a capacity we are developing that actually can hold wider systems where we can also go beyond these paradoxes, or wider organizations or networks. Or so it's a basic, deep understanding that actually all these silos we have been living in, all these kinds of separation that we see as this is me and that's you, and this is us and that is them, and we are different than them, and there's so many issues around this. It's so many forms it takes. But there comes a time when you sit in circle practice with a certain group around a certain topic that you start to see that there is no separation. As one of you said, it's always ongoing. Or moving to what I call the circle of creation. So all these topics of belonging, connection, projection, witnessing, it has, you could say, if it would be a linear process, which of course it is not, but the issues of belonging and connection, all this emotional stuff, you could call it, is actually moving more and more to the background, and your unique present being can be more available, can be more in service of the group. And so we start now with present embodied humans who speak from an embodied place. And what is specific is that we are not connecting in the group because we like each other or we have this need of belonging, but because we are actually engaging in a collective inquiry. We have a question in the middle, which is really speaking to us, which is really of, I don't know, of value. We have passion to dive into it and see what kind of answers, and not really answers, but insights can we collectively unearth. What is also specific is that we leave the only human space, meaning it's not only about us human beings, it's also about what is the right timing. What kind of time are we in the world? In what context are we in? What is this specific place telling us? Or what does it actually contribute to that whole collective wisdom? So it's not just dialogue in a sense of, oh, it's this group of people, let's say 15 people talking with each other, but it's actually integrating the natural rhythms of a group, the natural rhythms of insights that unfold. And maybe, and not maybe, most likely, you end up in a space of what I call not knowing yet. Like if you engage with the real topic, something that is real in the world, you will come to a place where like, hey, actually we don't know how to get rid of hunger in our region. We don't know yet. And that's how it's not that we have a problem and somewhere in the world there will be somebody who knows the answer. So let's find him or her and then we know it. No, it's we are faced with so many issues where the inquiry leads us to this space of like, oh my God, there's no known solutions. It's so complex, and it seems the complexity is increasing every day. And still, I think if we are really present, embodied, and putting in our own unique piece of information, either that's an emotion, or either that's something I read yesterday, or either it's something I was working on already for 20 years. If we just bring in these, I call them pieces of a puzzle, although we don't know how the puzzle should look like. There's no image that we can compare. But at some point, some real insight might show up. Sometimes in this place of not knowing yet, the only thing we can see is the one next minimal, elegant step. Like maybe the only thing we can see is like, hey, we need to continue this conversation. We need to continue this dialogue. And I also want to point out that this, what I call deeper circle practice, and if you read Otto Scharmer, he will call it a generative dialogue. And it's actually where the word dialogue comes from, dia, logos. I didn't study any, I think it's Latin, or maybe it's Greek. I always forget. It's Greek, I think. So the dia is not duo, it's not two. The dia is about looking through, and the logos is, of course, that the meaning that comes out of the conversation. So it's mainly a conversation that it's not at all going in a linear way. It's actually an exchange. And if you listen to that whole exchange and not just listen for, oh, I don't know, I don't like what he said, or I don't really get what she said. But if you keep your eyes and ears open for that wholeness, or that whole gestalt of this whole conversation, you can actually start seeing the meaning that is going through it. And that's the actual meaning of dialogos and dialogue. So I think what we are actually discovering as we are able to access, let's say, the deeper levels of our individuality, we kind of need to merge it with that collective sensing what probably was going on when we were hunting gatherers long time ago. But they didn't have the individuality. We do have the uniqueness. And we need to learn again how to have that collective sensing back into our conversations. So when we will enter into the dialogue in a couple of minutes, as we do in the check-in, we use a real or a virtual talking piece so that we slow down the conversation. It's not bad when there is silence. You can always use silence to let things sink in. And it's also good when you announce that you picked up the talking piece or you want to share something. Maybe you want to speak something that has not been formed already in your head before you actually entered the group. It's really an invitation to speak from a level of subtle sensing, from I have a sense I need to say something, but I don't know what it is yet. That's really, really encouraged. So also when you listen to others, you actually listen to the whole of the whole conversation. Like what is under the words, under your own words maybe, but also under the words of others. So we name it as you speak to the middle and from the middle. So you're not saying like, oh, I agree with you. It's not about that. It's what is that collective conversation? Where is it going? What does it seem to say? And sometimes what you need to share are just ordinary things or something that happened just an hour ago. Or so don't censor yourself like, oh, I need to come out with some really deep, deep thoughts. Maybe it's something very ordinary. Like I remember in one of the conversations we had that led to this practice, that a cat coming in somebody's office was actually very, very meaningful for that moment. So it's an ongoing process, and especially when you start doing this, there's no solution we need to have at the end. But we try to be with what is arising. And a question that I always hold, and it's part of the practice, like, can we challenge our assumptions? There's so many unconscious assumptions we hold, and it's quite difficult to unearth them and to bring them to the surface, but it might be something that we can hold in the back of our minds. I think with that, I stop so to leave some space for actually be in the practice, although 20 minutes will be short, but I invite everyone to put on the videos again. And let's see that first. And as I said in the beginning, and especially right now, I'm very aware that this is very short. And what I didn't even mention is that finding a guiding question for your inquiry is part of the practice, and is a very important part. But that we need to speak about that maybe for another time. So what I invite you for this next, let's say 20, 25 minutes. The question is, if this group wants to become a circle of creation with its unique evolutionary purpose, what capacities do we need to develop? And I'm going to read it again. If this group, this cohort, I think George calls them, wants to become a circle of creation with its unique evolutionary purpose, what capacities do we need to develop? Some were already mentioned in the check-in, like there was, I think, Ruth named something about courage, and somebody was mentioning being honest and so on. There were more elements which I don't remember right now. With that, similar practices in the check-in. The talking piece is in the middle, virtually. So you can always announce you're going to speak, and even if you don't know yet what precisely they're going to say, that's good to announce. That's why it's good to announce, like, I think I want to share something. Have some silence, let the articulation bubble up, and we go from there. And about 25 past the hour, we will move into the checkout. But that's for George to do. So with that, I'm putting the talking piece in the middle, and let's have a conversation, maybe a dialogue, as short as it is. Thank you.